Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Prospect Charter School's Algebra 1 course. Today we're going to be going over section 9.7, Solving Quadratic Functions Using Square Roots. Now, as you know, I am not actually physically present in class today because I am rather ill, so if I cough a lot and my voice seems a little off, please forgive me because I am sick. Alright, so here we go. Solving quadratic equations by using the square roots. So here's a cool thing about math. Sometimes you get more than one answer to a problem. For an example, let's say that we have x is equal to the square root of 9. Well, the square root means that what times itself gives us 9. And I know a bunch of you are shouting out, Mr. O'Neill, it's 3! It's 3! And, you know, I tend to agree with you, because 3 times 3 does give me 9. But what about negative 3? Negative 3 times negative 3 is a negative times a negative, which gives us a positive. And then 3 times 3 is also 9. So when we take the square root of something, we actually get two answers. We get the positive version and the negative version. So note, when you take the square root of a number, you get two possible outcomes. A positive and a negative version. So let's see this a few more times. If I say x is equal to the square root of 16, then x could be either positive 4 or negative 4. If I saw x is equal to the square root of 64, then that would be negative 8 or positive 8. If I saw x is equal to the square root of 144, then that would be either negative 12 or positive 12. In every case that we take the square root of a number, that we can take the square root of a number of, in other words, positive numbers, you get an answer where you will have either the positive version or the negative version. So why is that important? Well, that's important for when we're trying to figure out what is x when x squared is equal to 16. Well, to find what x is, we would of course take the square root of both sides, because the square root and the squared cancel each other out. But when I do that, if I'm only looking at it from this point of view, I get the square root of 16 is obviously 4. But I have to remember, the square root of 16 could also be negative 4, because negative 4 times negative 4 gives me 16. So when I take the square root of something, I need to have both the positive and the negative versions of it. So what does that have to do with solving for our stuff? Well, let's say that we're given x plus 2 squared is equal to 9, and we're told to solve for x. Well, when we're solving for these, we would have to do this in the order of operations. We need to get rid of the exponents first. So to get rid of the exponents, I would have to take the square root of both sides. So when I take the square root of both sides, I have x plus 2 is equal to the square root of 9. But because I know that square root of 9 could be positive or negative, I would have to say plus or minus the square root of 9. Then solving for x, I would subtract 2 from both sides, and I get x is equal to negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 9. This gives me two answers. One is negative 2 plus 3, because the square root of 9 could be 3. It also gives me negative 2 minus 3, because the square root of 9 could be negative 3. Doing some arithmetic, we get 1, and we also get negative 5. So x could be two numbers in this case. It could be 1 or it could be negative 5. Both of them work out. So when we're solving for these, my recommendation is to get the portion that has the squared on one side and everything else on the other first, and then start trying to figure out what the complete answer is. So for an example, let's say we're told to solve for x when we're given the equation 0 is equal to, let's go ahead and bring this down, 0 is equal to negative 2x squared plus 80. My recommendation is, just like before, try to get your x squared by itself and everything else on the other side. So to do that, I would subtract 80 from both sides. And on my next line, I would have negative 80 is equal to negative 2x squared. Now I divide both sides by negative 2, or multiply both sides by negative 1/2, whichever you prefer. And on the left, I get a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so I have a positive 40 is equal to x squared. Now if you'll notice, 40 isn't exactly a perfect square. So when I take the square root of both sides and I get plus or minus the square root of 40 is equal to x, I have a bit of a problem, because the square root of 40 is an irrational number. So I have two choices. Choice number one, I can just leave it. Leave it as a square root. I could just leave it as plus or minus the square root of 40. To be honest, as a mathematician, I actually prefer these. This is my favorite one, mainly because I like dealing with real numbers, not estimates. As soon as I turn it into a decimal, it becomes an estimate. And sometimes those estimations can cause things like very expensive satellites to go burning and crashing onto the surface of Mars, which would be kind of bad. So I don't like estimates. But unfortunately, sometimes we're not given a choice. Choice 2 is convert to a decimal. Now to do this requires a calculator. So we pull out our handy dandy calculator, go ahead and turn it on, if it will turn on. It wants to be a little slow today. Come on, turn on. Okay, that one doesn't want to work. So I'm going to minimize it, minimize another class, and another class, and another class. Start it back up. There we go. So then what we do is we clear out our old data, and we were trying to find the square root of 40. So if you'll notice over here, above the x squared button is the square root. So you go second square root, type in your number, in this case 40, and then you press enter and it gives you a number. In this case we're getting 6.324555532. This is an estimation of what the square root of 40 is, but we can still use it. I think we can use it up to 2 decimal places for this particular case, so I would round it to 6.32. So going back here, I would say x is equal to plus or minus 6.32. If I do not say which one to use, you can use either and it will be counted correctly. If I say round to the nearest hundredth, you would have to turn it into a decimal. If I say leave it as a square root, then you would have to leave it as a square root. It all depends on what your instructions say. This one would be leave as square root. And this one would be round to nearest hundredths. Alright. And that, ladies and gentlemen, should be it. This is actually a pretty easy lesson. So from here, it's before you go work, which is homework that you need to have done before you leave. Now, you guys have been very difficult with me on more than one occasion, and I've noticed a lot of people don't do their homework before they go, which really annoys me. So everyone is going to do their homework in class, in your seat, without help, without talking, without music, without anything. Once you are done with your homework, you can remain seated and read a book. If that book is an electronic book, then that's okay too. Otherwise, put your head down and take a nap. So here's your work. Section 9.7. Hashtags, math is awesome, being sick is not. 1 through, and it looks like it's going to be a lot, but they're actually pretty easy. Let's go 1 through 35 odd. And then 41, 43, and 45. Actually, I don't like 45. Let's go ahead and remove 45 and put 47 instead. Alright, there you go. Good luck, and have fun.